Today we're going to take a closer look at the new Bonesplitterz Battletome for Age of Sigmar. Spiky bits. Make sure you stay in the trenches by becoming a supporter over on Patreon and also scoring yourself some free miniature swag in the process. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Check out our site, spikybits.com, for all the hot hobby tutorials, news, rumors on all your favorite hobby topics. And head on over to thelongwar.net. That's the home of the battle reports for exclusive content, early access videos, and more. Become a veteran of the Long War today. What's up, hobby maniacs? Baer here with our tips and tactics, our fantastic tips and tactics video review of the new Bonesplitterz Battletome. Now this is the, what do I want to say, this will be the second of the new style Battletomes for the Age of Sigmar, basically post General's Handbook, where they got all the fantastic special abilities. Again, if you have the old Battletomes from before General's Handbook, well, they're basically a collection of war scrolls and battalions, and that's the only way to get some of that stuff. Besides some of the Realmgate Wars books, which I think there's 4 of. It's kind of like the Encyclopedia Britannica. We're still trying to figure out where everything is and all the rules and such, and everything kind of came out all at once. So it's like, imagine if all the new rules for 40k all came out at the same time. We'd be a little scrambling trying to figure out where everything's at. Anyhow, so this is a fantastic book. If you haven't seen our first look review and our first look review basically of it from last week, check that out, because it basically goes over the book, what's contained in the book. Today we're going to talk about the actual rules themselves, the war scrolls, and some of the other stuff that you know, I guess is you consider noteworthy, basically, because there's a lot of differences in here. And generally when we do these, they take about a half an hour. You know, we go through, we try to be as thorough as we can, but we're not going to hit every single point, or else we would be here for hours. Nobody wants to listen to that, right? So so there's going to be some of that. Now, basically what you need to know right off, you know, too long, didn't watch. What you need to know right off the top of the bat is that there is, well, let me find my notes here, that there's basically 6 new War Scroll battalions in here. 3 of them are war clans, which are basically like ginormous, super mega battalions. It's a 110-page book, and there are, I believe, 8 new War Scrolls in here. And what's different about this, as opposed to the Grand Alliance Destruction book that came out, is they've actually redone the rules. Like, if you pull up your General's Handbook app, or pull up your Age of Sigmar app, like, these rules, some of these don't exist anymore. Like, well, I think the Savage Order Boar Boys are the same, but the basic, what is it, under this faction in here, like, you don't really have your Savage Orc Shaman anymore. You have the War Boss, which it's a plastic kit, but the Savage Orcs are split into like 3 different units. So they basically took the Oruk box here, the Savage Oruks, they made 3 different units out of that. Well, technically 4 if you count the dudes with the big spear. And then the Boar Boys, they split those into Boar Boys and Boar Boys Maniacs, right? So this is kind of a little bit invalidated, and you kind of need this here. And that's where we're actually going to pick up the scene at in here, in the back, and we're going to take a look at some of their war scrolls, because that's the best place to start, I feel like, when we're going over these things, so you can kind of get an idea of the units themselves and what is contained in the book. So first off, we have a bunch of heroes. There's four basic heroes in here that you can select from. You've got your Wargog Prophet, and just to give you some visuals, let's pull up the app. If you're not using the app yet, it's pretty dope. Definitely check it out. So here's the app for these guys. So you got your Wargog Prophet, which is your traditional, like, you know, crazy witch doctor shaman looking thing, which is your super prophet guy right there. Your War Doc, which is just basically like your normal everyday run-of-the-mill shaman kind of guy over here. And then you've got your Savage Big Boss, which there's an Uruk Big Boss in here, which I think is a typo. It's just basically that guy right there, which is a plastic clam pack. And then of course you got your Weird Knob, which is going to be on a Boar Boy, or a wild boar, right? So right there. So those are your 4 types of heroes, and heroes can do a lot of stuff in this book, which you're going to see here in a second. So then you got your Savage Oryx, which we've already saw. Everybody knows what those are. They're basically Savage Orcs, right? And then you got Savage Orc Boar Boys. Everybody knows what those are. Those are the dudes with the spears that are riding the backs of the crazy boars, right? Then you get to the Savage Big Stabbers, which are the 2. They also come in the Savage Orc box. That's those guys right there with the big spear. And then you've got the Moor Boys, right? Which are armed with a choppa and a shiv instead of the spear. And those are another version which you can also build out of the Savage Orc box, which are right there, okay? So, but not to complicate things any further, but you've also got your Savage Boar Boy Maniacs, which are the, I guess you could say the more of the crazed hand-to-hand boar rider guys that you can make, and those are right here. Those are the Maniacs. They're a little bit different, and they are armed with 2 chompas, not choppas, chompas, as opposed to the champa and the boar war stick, which are a 2-inch range weapon for those guys right there. And then the third unit that you can make out of the Savage Orc Boar Boy box that you can just buy off the shelf right now, I think you get 20 of the dudes for $50 retail, which is kind of a little bit of a savings over what they used to be, is the Arrow Boys. And the Arrow Boys aren't necessarily guys that shoot arrows, they just have bows, sting of bows, and they kind of stab at you in combat with the arrows right here, and they also have chompas. So, there's that. Now that basically is the collection of what's different from this versus the Grand Alliance Destruction versus what you could download from Games Workshop. So there is some new Warscroll content in here that you really have to keep in mind. Now, you know, we're not going to break into all this because we're already 5 minutes in, and we still have a lot of the stuff that, you know, you need to review your troops, basically. Now, yes, this faction is just basically a box of Savage Orcs and a box of Boar Boys mixed in with some special characters, and that's literally all you need to make this army, or this particular faction, allegiance, if you will, of Oruks, okay? But you know, that aside, they're still kind of intricate. They seem pretty fun to play, you know, overall, as I'm reading and going through all the stuff. They have a lot of saves, a lot of funsy stuff. You know, the little wizard guy can rub his little pet squig, you know, to try to get a +1 to casting. You know, I really like that little fluffy stuff. It really gets me going. But don't get it twisted. This is still a book, and it's still, you know, these guys were always good in Warhammer Fantasy, and they were super funsies, and they're even better now. But this is kind of some of the stuff that you're going to want to see up front here, right? This is the new war gear and things like that. The previous, you know, this is only the second one in, and now we know that the Ogres are coming out, and they're going to get the same type of deal. So hopefully we'll see a book that comes out and collects some special allegiance abilities that aren't like, you know, the generic like order, or destruction, or chaos, you know, but more like specific, like, you know, the Stormcast and the Bloodbounds and things like that. And now we get these special abilities, and there's like maybe some sort of like mini generals a book that comes out, but in the future, you know, we might see that. So first off, allegiance abilities, that basically is saying if everybody in your army is, you know, basically a Bonesplitterz allegiance, then you can use these fantastic things right here, these battle traits, which give you War Paint, Monster Hunter, and then you have also some command traits that you can use, which are different from command abilities. Command traits you don't have to allocate your command ability that you can only do during your hero phase, okay? So it's kind of like a bonus to your general that he gets right there, and then they go over that right there. You also get artifacts of power and also arcane artifacts and their very own specific spell lore, which is really neat. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here, and then it gets into battalions, and then also the war clans, which are basically collections of battalions. So first off, battle traits. The War Paint is actually pretty cool. It basically lets you always reroll a 6, or excuse me, it always lets you when making a save roll for a Bonesplitterz model, the dice result of a 6 is always a successful save. This means that there's always a chance of passing a save roll regardless of the attack's rank. But remember, if the save says dash, you don't get a chance to save, so that won't help you, okay? Furthermore, each time a Bonesplitterz model suffers a mortal wound on a 6, the mortal wound is ignored as the War Paint somehow saves the Orut from harm. Remember, you don't get a save against it, but you get a chance to ignore it on a 6. Very important point of line of rules to remember there, because mortal wounds are very different. You just roll, and then it just kind of happens. It gets applied there. So now they have these cool Monster Hunter abilities, which are really neat too. If a Bonesplitter model unit kills a monster in a combat phase, then basically they get a bonus. So if you select a Bonesplitterz unit to make its attacks in a combat phase, and it's within 3 inches of an enemy monster. These guys are really good at killing monsters. This is obviously their thing, right? roll a dice before piling in and consult the following table. It's very important that you roll the dice before you pile in because, you know, if you roll a 1 or 2, you get to pile in 6, right? Here, you can reroll any failed wounds for models in the unit directed their attacks against the monsters in that phase, and on a 5 or 6, a wound roll of 6 becomes a mortal wound, which is really cool. And then the command traits, like I was saying, this is in addition to a command ability. Your general would just get this. They can apply it. There's no restriction to it. So the first one is your general ignores mortal wound on rolls of 4 or 6, 4 or 5 or 6 instead of just a 6 based on the war paint right there. And then he's got the Prophet of the Wog. You can select that. And basically you can reroll the first failed battle shock test for each friendly Bonesplitterz unit in the battle shock phase, which is pretty good. If your general kills a monster in a combat phase, they can immediately pile in and attack again, which is really neat because, you know, some of these guys got a lot of attacks and can do a lot of damage. Each time, Killer Instinct, each time you would roll a 6 or more for your general, that attack is, or to wound, that attack is resolved at a rend of 3, which is pretty brutal too because that's going to get right through most every armor that's out there except for a 2-up, which you don't see a whole lot of that. Wogmonder, all friendly Bonesplitter units add 1 to their charge roll if they're within 10 inches of your general. And Monster Killer, instead of rolling on the Monster Hunter table, they get to always pick, which could, you know, depending on what you're going up against, you know, you're going up against some Durden with some Fire Slayers with a Magma Droth or something, or, you know, some big trees or something, hey, go for it, right? Now, there's a specific lore of the Savage Wog. This is the second specific lore that we've seen next to the Sylvaneth. And that's really cool to see right here too. Now there's some really important spells in here, but the very first thing that they tell you is that you get bonuses to these spells if you cast on a double, but the double only applies based off what you roll on the dice, not any modifiers. So try to keep that in mind right there because you don't get those bonuses basically. So the first one is a Squiggly Curse, which is all these have a casting value of 6 except for the last one, which is 7, which doesn't seem that bad because you're rolling on 2 dice, average of 7. We can all do the math there, right? So the Squiggly Curse is basically you can select a hero or monster within 20 inches and roll a die. On a 1, it suffers a mortal wound. On a 2 to 5, it suffers D3. And on a 6, it suffers D6 mortal wounds. If the casting roll is a double, it also suffers an additional D3 mortal wounds, right? If the model is slain from that, then your caster gets +1 to all further casting attempts for the rest of the game. Pretty solid right there. Then you've got the Hand of Gork, or possibly Mork. It has a casting value of 6 as well. You can choose a Bonesplitter unit. That unit doubles how far it can move and fly in your next movement phase. If the casting roll is a double and the spell was cast, triple how far the unit can move instead. And there's also some battalions in here that also let you get extra movement. Brutal Beast Spirits. Now this one's really interesting. So it's got a casting value of 6. It successfully casts any of your Bonesplitter units within 18 until your next hero phase. Gain 1 to all run, charge, and hit rolls for that unit. Very strong. If the casting roll is a double, you can immediately select a different unit, right, within 18 inches of the caster to get that bonus as well. So I'm a fan of that one for sure. Bone Crusher is casting value 6. You pick an enemy unit within 24 that's invisible. The closer the target to the caster, the more powerful the attack will be. If it's within 6, it suffers D6 mortal wounds. Between 6 and 12, D3, and 12 inches away, only 1. Now, if the casting roll is a double, then you double the number of mortal wounds inflicted, but the caster also takes a D3 mortal wounds, so that could end badly for you. Cunning Beast Spirits has a casting value of 6. If successfully cast, pick a unit within 18. In your next hero phase, your opponent must reroll all hit rolls of 6 or more that target the unit. It's okay. My money is on this number 3 right here. And number 6 is Gorkle Morkwood's War Cry, which works very similar to, I guess, Mind War in 40k. It has a casting value of 7. You pick one of your casters in a unit within 18 that is visible, roll a dice and add the caster's bravery to result, then your opponent rolls a dice and adds the bravery of that target to the result. If the result is equal to higher than your opponent's, the target unit suffers D3 mortal wounds and is stunned by the deafening roar. Furthermore, until the end of your next hero phase, which, remember, you could go double turns in this, so there's an important distinction here. The unit halves the distance it can move, run, and charge, and cannot be chosen to make attacks until after all other units have attacked. So it almost gets concussed, to use 40k words right there. So that one's, that's very tactful. And remember, when you select these powers, depending on how many casters you have, you can just say, hey, all my guys have the same power. They all come with the Mystic Shield, and they all come with the Arcane Bolt, right? But you can also say, hey, all my guys have this, or you can say like, hey, my one caster has this one, and my one caster has this one. So you want the Beast Spirits, and you want the Gorkle Morkwood War Cry? you're good to go. Now, over to the artifacts page, you got treasures and you got normal war gear. Or excuse me, arcane and normal artifacts here. These go basically on your heroes that aren't, wizards, and these are your wizard artifacts, right? And you can get extra ones for each Warscroll battalion you have. And in here, the average cost of a Warscroll battalion is about 300 points. So it's doable in 1,500 point games, I feel like. You can't have the same one, and you can't have more than one artifact of power on a single guy. But there is that, okay? So just keeping that in mind here. So for your heroes, you can either roll on this or you can just say they have it. Same with this one right here for your wizards, right? So the first one is a tattoo that gives +1 to any save rolls for this hero. The second one is you pick one of the melee weapons to be a dragon tooth, and then that weapon inflicts double damage against monsters each time the wound roll is a 5 or more. Then under the same kind of guidelines here, that you can nominate it to be a shiv, which gives it +1 attack to the characteristic, and an additional attack each time you kill a monster. I don't know who's running around with all these monsters in the mortal realms, but somebody needs to get these orcs on them because they obviously are good at killing monsters, right? Number 4 is Doc Juice, which I think is kind of cool. During your hero phase, you can drink it. If you roll a 1, you take a mortal wound. 2 to 5, you heal D3 wounds. On a 6, you heal D6. Very nice. I think the average, I think the savage boss guy has 5 wounds though. But oh no, he has 6. That's cool. I thought he had 5, so he's a little strong right there. Savage Trophy, +1 to the bravery characteristics for all Bonesplitterz within 10, and Lucky Bone, reroll all run rolls, hit rolls, wound rolls, and save and damage rolls of 1 for the Baer. Pretty solid right there. I think my money's probably, maybe on 4 or 6 right there. Then we go over to Arcane Treasures. Remember, these are for the wizards, right? This seemingly random assortment, Juju Whatnots, is basically anytime you cast a spell and it was a double, you can immediately tap to cast another spell. Now, it's good and bad because remember, you can't cast the same spell more than once, and you only have the 2 spells that you automatically come with, plus you can choose to have another spell. So I don't know how good that is. Maybe somebody can correct me on the strategio there. I'm not a strategery when it comes to this stuff quite 100% yet, but that doesn't seem super good to me. On 2 is the Big Spirit Stick. Pick one of the wizard's melee weapons to be this Big Spirit Stick. It adds +1 attacks. Of course, if you're fighting a monster, you get an extra attack. Shocker. I see a theme here. Mork's Money Bits. Add +1 to the wizard's casting rolls for each enemy monster within 24 of him. I don't know where all these monsters are. Somebody needs to get a handle on these monsters. This is crazy. The Great Zappa Squig. The bearer of the Great Zappa Squig knows 1 additional spell. The spell is always randomly generated by rolling the dice and consulting the lore of the Savage Wog, which we already talked about. So roll that first, and then you get to choose which one you didn't get, maybe. I don't know. But it's always good to have extra spells, I feel like. The Big Wargog Mask, I like this. So basically, you select a unit within 12, and the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Then you can continue staring. If you roll a 3 or better, it does another D3 wounds. Now, on a 1 or 2, the wearer is immediately slain. Brutal. But you can continue doing it until you at least wipe out the unit or kill your little caster guy. I feel like it could be good, or it could be bad, but disposable 100 point, little chamois running around probably aren't the best thing in a 1,500 point game. Number 6, Mystical Wog Paint is add 1 to all unbinding rolls made by a wizard. In addition, the wearer of the Mystical Wog Paint can attempt to unbind spells if they were within 24 of the casting wizard instead of the normal 18. So, important distinction right there as well. Now, we get into the Warscroll battalions, and something that a lot of people have mentioned or haven't mentioned, we've seen it in the comments on here, is when it comes to playing pitch battle, you basically get to choose who goes first by who is finished setting up first, right? Now, if you take a battalion, you can choose to set that battalion up all as one, okay? Which right here, it explains all that in this little blurb. Furthermore, there's a little section of blurbs that you might want to read that talks about, saves and all sorts of things, which I think is in this, right here on this hits and temps. And then this is basically where it says things like if you have a save of dash, you automatically fail even if you have a modifier to your save and things like that. Other important tips. So it almost like it's adding rules to the 4-page rule book, but it's more specific to things that weren't necessarily in that rule book, so to speak, right there. Okay. So now we get into the battalions themselves. So we're doing good on time. We're about 20 minutes right now. And, just kind of making our way here. So the first one is a war clan, which is a combination of battalions, okay? So basically one of each battalion and a Wargog Prophet, which is, you remember that big, crazy, you know, your conventional witch doctor you used to see him from Scooby-Doo cartoons, right? And what this does is basically it gives you the extra Juju War Paint, which is also conferred in some other battalions in the back here. But this is no joke. So what's cool is that you can reroll all failed saves for models in the Savage War Clan, but the reroll saves will only be passed on a roll of 6. So say you have a 3-up, you fail it, you can try to save it on a 6-up, okay, which is really cool. And you get to reroll that special war paint to ignore mortal wounds. Obviously, it only works on a 6 again, but it's not a save, so they word it a little differently. So you know, you make sure it says it there. Now, each one of these rucks, which I guess a ruck is a clan, I'm assuming that's what it is. You know, there's all sorts of new terminology in here. You know, we got ogres and we got oruks and you know, I don't even know anymore. It's all new words. It's all TM. You know, no more Tolkien. Gosh, why can't we just keep Tolkien words? Everybody knows Tolkien. Anyways, so these little battalions in here. This is about 1,700 bare bones, give or take. So this isn't gonna work in most things, but there's a way to get these abilities in the back here that I'm going to show you. So then the first actual battalion, this is the Cop Rook, which I guess is clan. It's 2 to 5 War Dogs, which is your mini chamois, we'll call them, and 2 to 5 of Savage Orruk More Boys. And these guys are kind of cool. Basically, this is just like a super cast. You know, they get extra casting dice and they can move around and things like that. I don't know. It's cool. I don't know how much you're going to be casting and stuff with these guys, but it seems kind of neat and it's fluffy. So I'm okay with it. Then we got the Snaga Ruck, which is 2 Maniac Weird Knobs and 2 to 4 units of Savage Boar Boy Maniacs, right? Which, remember, these are a little bit different from the normal Boar Boys. They don't have the spears. They have the 2-hand weapon kind of things. Now, at first I was reading this and I was like, I don't know. I don't really get it. So here goes. In your hero phase, you can make one Savage War Boy Maniac unit from the Savage Ruck can attempt to charge the enemy unit if there's an eligible unit within 12, as if it were the charge phase. You can re-roll the charge roll if they're within 10 inches of the other battalion's Weird Knobs. If the charge is successful, roll a dice for each charging model that ends within 1 inch of the enemy model. On a 4 or more, the enemy unit suffers a mortal wound. I like that because, you know, chances are you'll get a couple mortal wounds in there. You only have to be within 1. You do have to reach within a half an inch to be in combat, however. For each roll of 1, however, the charging unit suffers a mortal wound instead. So it's kind of good and it's kind of bad. It's like one of those surprise, I got you, but maybe not, I got myself. I don't know. It's funsies. I like them. They're funsies. Then we got the Brutal Ruck, which is ogres are always competing. Oh, this is the one where it's just basically like just getting across the table. I mean, you get to move extra. If they start to move within 10 inches of big boss, you can always move an extra 6. So it gets you across the table quicker. These are your contemporary Savage Boar Boys and your Savage Orruks. You know, they got the spears and everything, not the 2-handed weapons. And of course, you got the Savage Big Boss and a squad of the dudes on foot there. So it's kind of like a combined arms, almost little type force there. And then we got Cunning Ruck, which, you know, it's 1 Savage Boar Boss and 1 Orruks and Savage Orruk War Boys. They're okay. They're not exactly the best. You can pick, let's see, if you're within 10 of the battalion Savage Boar Box, you can pick and move as with the movement phase if it is more than 3 inches from the enemy. And you can pile an attack if it were the combat phase, which within 3 inches of the enemy. So it gives you an extra attack to, you get an extra chance to shoot or get an extra chance to attack. I'm not sure how strong it is, but it's options right there. And all of these, I mean, bare bones, you're talking 300 points for most of these formations. I mean, this one right here, the Cunning Ruck, is only 300 points for this one. You know, so a lot of these, it's kind of worth doing if you got the box set and you can just take it, you know, because not only, remember, when you take a battalion, you also get to get a piece of war gear for one of your heroes too, which this one, of course, requires a hero. Then you got the Teeth Ruck, which is 2 to 5 of the Big Savage Big Stabbers, which are these things right here. And they get extra, they can pile in within 6 instead of the normal 3 against monsters, because Lord knows there's too many monsters. We got to kill those guys. They're all over the mortal realms. And this is only a 200 point battalion right there. Then it gets into the war clans, which are like the super battalions, right? So they got all of this stuff in here, and sometimes some extra units like a Wargog Prophet or something like that. Now, these, you know, we're talking an average of 300 points for most of these, except for, you know, like the Teeth one's only 2. but sometimes they make you take extra stuff, which is, you know, if you have to have a Savage Orb and 4 to 10 units instead of 2 to 5, now you're talking an extra, what, 120 points for a squad of Oruks, right? So now you're talking about an extra, you know, give or take 320 points right there. So these are easily between 17 and 2,000 points for a lot of these. But what's cool about them is they do a little bit more. They're more specialized, I guess is the word for it. So this one particular one right here, if it contains the War God Prophet and has the maximum number of battalions, which I guess would be just the Cunning Ruck right there, because this is may also contain, right? So you really just need one Cunning Ruck that has extra of the required units, which remember our Cunning Ruck was, where is it? Right here. So that one's super easy. That's only 300 points. But then you have to add a couple extra things right there. So no big deal. We get up to 500 points. 500 points. Now you've unlocked the Juju Warpaint. So you kind of see what I'm saying? Like, you can mix and kind of match these things in here. Now you're re-rolling your saves, you know, your saves into a 6. You're re-rolling those ignore mortal wound saves, or not saves, but to ignore mortal wounds. You kind of get what I'm saying there. So also, in addition to, they get all sorts of cool stuff, like +1 to their bravery if they kill a monster. They also, instead of rolling on a monster on her table, your general and all the friendly units always choose their results. So this is, you know, getting up in the face of some monsters right there. Then you got the Iceboom War Clan, which is, this reminds me, I kind of want to call these the Captain Planet, because it's like wind, ice, fire, you know, it's kind of like, that's kind of the theme I'm getting here, and which would also help you with like the war paint and stuff, right? It's the same deal. You got, they're very similar, kind of orchestrated each other. Each one of them gives you the extra Juju war paint. They give you, you know, you basically have to take one of these, which are right around, you know, 300 points or whatever, depending on how much extra they require of you. But you can splash in all this other stuff as necessary. Now, this particular one here lets adjust your movement to 11 instead of 9, which 11 is pretty ridiculous for these cavalry units, right? You also get these frozen weapons, right? If an enemy monster suffers any wounds from a model with an Iceboom War Clan in the combat phase, it can only be selected to attack once all other eligible units have attacked. So it kind of confers that concussed ability using a term from 40k, because there's no initiative in this. Once a hero from the Iceboom War Clan can have the following artifact of power instead of one choosing at 88, 89. This little thing right here is basically rounds down damage and heals 1 wound in each of your hero phases. Pretty powerful right there. So there's your ice clan right there, and then here's your fire clan over here. These guys remind me of some of the guys in WoW back in the day. Oh man, that was those were good times right there. So same deal, War God Prophet, Cop Rock, and then basically, you know, you gotta have extra War Dogs instead of 2 to 5. So a couple extra, not a big deal, easy to do. Confers the Juju War Paint. Now, any casting rolls for a wizard is that is a double is successful even if the total is less than the minimum normally required. So remember, most of them are 6 or 7. So you know, you roll a 6, you roll a 4, you know, you roll a 2. Hey, you're good. I guess you're casting some powers, right? You get a power and you get a power. Red Wog War Paint, the glowing war paint of the War Clan, is enchanted by the War Clan's many shamans. When it's affected by an enemy unit, roll a dice. On a 6, the spell has no effect. So you can try to unbind it. If it still goes off, well, you roll a 6 and it doesn't affect if they shoot like a missile or something at them, who knows. The War Clan's wizards know the Bloodwog spell, in addition to all the others. No one wizard can attempt to cast Bloodwog in each hero phase, and the Bloodwog is casting value of 8, so it's the highest we've seen in the book so far. Successfully cast, they pick a Bonesplitterz unit within 6. That unit can immediately pile an attack as if it were the combat phase. So you're doing that during the hero phase, you're basically getting double attacks. If you went double turns, now you're getting 3 freaking attacks. So that's pretty nuts if you pick the right unit to pile in and do some serious damage there. And then, like I said, we get to the hints and tips section right here. When to use abilities. Stuff at the starter phase, you pretty much pick it all. Stuff at the end of phase, you pretty much pick. Saves up dash, mean you don't get a save. Minimum ranges. I mean, this is all very, very simple and basic stuff that Games Workshop has really gone out of their way to try to highlight and kind of, I guess, impress upon our dull minds, so to speak. Because if you don't, we tend to just kind of lollygag down win at all cost land. So it's really cool that they're putting this stuff in here, and then also. There's some stuff in here that you need to read that's just basically explaining how war scrolls are. But remember, with battalions, you can set them all up in one go, or individually. They give you all sorts of options. But the fact that we have options here in America, we like options. Oh, and then the back of the book, you got your 4 pages rules there. So that's it. We did it in almost under half an hour. For being such a small, I mean, this is basically like 2 boxes make up this faction. I mean, it's not, they do different things. There's not a whole lot to this faction, but as you can see, as we're reading through it, they have a lot of character, they have a lot of fluff, you know, they're kind of neat. Like, they do a lot of different things, and you can style them differently. You can, I mean, cavalry's cool, and their hard-hitting, you know, foot troops are cool too. So, just a lot of stuff, a lot of bookkeeping work with these guys between the Grand Alliance Destruction book and then this as well. But, you know, it's totally worth it. They got a lot of cool abilities, and hopefully we'll see more and more abilities conferred over to each other faction's allegiance here in the near future from Games Workshop.
Deleted scenes, bonus content, and all the interviews and post-game wrap-up videos can be located in the Hall of Veterans on thelongwar.net. Visit thelongwar.net today and try a week completely free with no strings attached. That's not all. Thelongwar.net is also your hobby resource for exclusive early access with an ad-free experience to all your favorite videos. Members of the Hall of Veterans gain early exclusive access to multiple hobby videos.